Loud. Okay. So welcome to this event for Greg Mania's Born to be Public. Uh, we are the Bureau of General Services Queer Division. My name is Greg Newton. I am the co-founder with my partner Donnie Jokum of the Bureau, a queer bookstore and event space that we founded in 2012. And we've been hosted by the LGBT Community Center since 2014. Of course, with this little pandemic situation, we are closed, but we've been doing lots of online events like this. So thanks for joining us. And we also launched an online store, which is really great. So in the chat function, I put the links for both Greg's and for John's books, which are on our online store. So you can go there and order them. What else do I want to say? Check out our upcoming events on our website, bgsqd.com/events. And we've been doing about 1 to 2 a week, and then we post them on YouTube. So if you miss something, you can always check it out there. And I think that's it for me. I'm going to read the bios of our guests and then turn it over to them, and we're going to get started. So, Greg Mania is a writer, comedian, and award-winning screenwriter based in New York City. His words have been published in The New Yorker, Vanity Fair, O, the Oprah Magazine, Paper, among other international online and print platforms. His debut memoir, Born to be Public, is out now from Clash Books. John Glynn is a writer and senior editor at Hanover Square Press. His writing has appeared in O, the Oprah Magazine, The Daily Beast, and The Millions. His first book, Out East, Memoir of a Montauk Summer, was named a Cosmopolitan Best Book of 2019, and O, the Oprah Magazine Best LGBTQ Book of 2019, a Newsweek Best Book of Summer, and an Indie Next Pick. He lives in Manhattan. So please put your hands together and give a warm welcome to Greg and to John.
Yay! Thanks, Greg. And hi to the other Greg. It's so cool to be here. I am so proud of you and your book. It's been everywhere. I feel like everywhere I turn, I've seen it. I mean, even Oprah was praising it,
personal.
which is pretty cool.
We had a late night battle.
Yeah. But I feel like there's so much I love about your book. It had me laughing out loud, but I think my favorite part about it is that it's sort of this like heartfelt love letter to a specific moment in your life. And when I say your, I mean like all of our lives, right. That time when like everything's like new and exciting, but also like totally terrifying and filled with uncertainty. And it's all swirling together into sort of this like specific kind of like magic. And you capture that so well on the page. And we'll dive into all of that in a bit. But like to start, can I just get a quick life update on you?
Yeah.
I haven't seen you in 2020. How's your year been? What have you been up to? Are you like a zucchini bread baker now? Like, what's your deal?
I do the air frying now. That's pretty much like I've joined the masses in the air frying.
Oh, yeah.
But before I get into that, I want to thank the Bureau of General Services M-Queer Division for having us. I know that M- is important, Greg. But I'm very happy to be here and thank you for the welcome. And John, I fucking stan you. I've been a fan before I was a friend. So
likewise.
This is not lost on me of how special this is. But I will say, it's been a fucking great year. It's been the time of life. No, it's been challenging, obviously, with we've got the pandemic, we've got the protests, we've got climate crises, we've got everything's falling apart, the election. It's been challenging and it's been hard, but personally, I should have called this book Born to Isolate because I'm thriving. I'm very like this book. I mean, I feel like this book does maybe I haven't positioned it properly because it makes me seem like I'm a total extrovert. And you see the party photos and the club days, but I mean, I'm retired from that. Like, this is my central, like, modus operandi. Like, this is how I function now. So I will say that I do better like this, and I don't mind it. Yeah, I get depressed because I don't like go outside for a few days, or like I should be like walking, but which I do have to be careful at. But I'm okay doing
Good.
it.
That's all I care about, is that
Yeah,
you're okay. I'm glad
yeah.
to hear it. But it's certainly been a tough year for anyone publishing a debut book. So the fact that yours has sort of cracked through with all of this amazing coverage is fantastic. And one thing, I'm an editor in my day job, and one thing that we always talk about is like the keynote of a book, and that's that first line that you see in bold, usually on like the Amazon sales page. And it's like, how do you distill a book into one sentence? Like, I'm sure that when people are talking with you and you're meeting new people and they're like, they find out that you've written a book, I'm sure the first question they always ask is, well, what is it about? And I'm curious to know, like, in your own words, how do you describe your book to people? What is your book? I mean, I know this. I know what it is.
Oh God, yeah. I would just say it's a queer memoir first and foremost, and it just chronicles growing up closeted. I'm literally just reciting the back jacket copy. It chronicles growing up closeted in New Jersey with Polish immigrant parents, and then finding a space for myself in New York nightlife, and then pivoting to a career in writing and comedy. And it just follows that snapshot of my life from like 18 to 25.
I love it.
And childhood too, but yeah.
Can I ask you about, like, what was your coming out experience like? You talk about, I know you're close with your family, but you also say in the book, I'm paraphrasing, I think, but you say you knew you were gay since you were in utero.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
Like, you just clearly had a strong sense of self from the time you were like a zygote, so that's cool.
Yep. From the get-go.
Sort of the opposite of me. I'm a bit of a late bloomer, but what was your coming out experience like?
I feel like this book chronicles different coming outs. Like, I'm sort of fascinated with this idea because we sort of have to do it multiple times depending on, whom we're with and what stage of our lives we're in. Like, and we can talk about this later, but the next book that I'm writing is coming out again as someone who lives with chronic pain and getting into my fucking endless buffet of diagnoses I've dealt with in the past few years. But coming out for me in terms of my family, because you're growing up with these people, and no matter what your genetic family situation is, it's hard to, you don't want to change anything in that. You're scared of like a rift occurring if you come out as someone that your family might not know you as. So for me, I really dragged my feet with coming out to my parents because I was just scared of my bedrock changing forever. And I didn't come out to them directly. As you probably know, it's in the book, and I've written about this for Oprah Mag, that they Googled me and they found some answers because I was blogging. This was in college. I was openly blogging about, my adventures in the club scene and nightlife and the outfits and all of this stuff, and crushes on boys that I had. And, they had questions. I'd come home from college wearing like a Debbie Harry crop top, and they would be like, "Oh, how's classes?" And I'm like 13 cigarettes hanging out my mouth. Like, everything's fine, mom and dad. Like, so, and in that way, I was sort of a late bloomer because I was always very obedient, a good kid growing up, good grades, and I was never rebellious. But like in college, I discovered, the life below 14th Street and dive bars and people with names like Lady Starlight, and I want to be a bad kid. And I had that, like, in terms of that being a late bloomer, like that's what happened to me when I was 18, 19, 20, even 21. And naturally, my parents had questions. I wasn't very open about that. I was open to everyone else. I was open to the whole entire internet about, my lifestyle and my identity. and they Googled me, and they were like, I want to know more about my kids. So what's this generation doing? They're oversharing on the internet, on the computers, and they're gonna Google me. And then my blog popped up, and then we had a conversation.
Oh God.
Yeah, so that's how it happened. And it took some time for them to get used to not just that, but like how open I was.
Yeah. Well, I love you say in the book, you know, coming out isn't just about, it doesn't just relate to being, to your sexual identity.
Right.
That it, and I wrote this down because I love how you describe it. You say, sometimes it's about, will you still love me if, is that feeling, you know, when you're coming out, you know, whatever it is. And it's a fear, at least for me, it was a fear of like, I'm, by sharing my sexual identity, I am dismantling the vision that, like, for example, my parents had for my life.
Yeah.
And of course, the question in the back of my head was, will you still love me?
Right.
Yeah. And I thought that was such a cool.
And that's such a universal feeling, because like if you look at our two experiences, yes, they're different. You were, 27. You have a rising career at what is it, Simon & Schuster, the imprint with them.
Yeah, it's Simon & Schuster. Yep.
Yeah, and you were, you had your tight-knit group of friends, but at the end of the day, like, you're reckoning with something, and I was reckoning with something, and we're sort of like, when you look at the Venn diagram of our, of our work, like you see there's like the messiness of identity that we're both trying to grapple with, and it's that messiness that I really want to sort of hook into, because I'm fascinated with it.
Well, speaking of that messiness, you mentioned crushes that you had. And one of my favorite scenes in the whole book is your very first crush, Steve, from college. Can you tell us that scene, what the exchange that you had with your crush?
So mortified. I had to take my glasses off. The wedding. I'm so thinking about it. Okay. So Steve, yeah, my first college crush, freshman year at Hofstra. Steve, like the brand ambassador of Twinks, if you've ever seen him, like H&M, like fucking teal V-neck with the cardigan. I loved him. Anyway, so I saw him at like one of the dining halls, and I was like, oh my God, who is that cute boy? And it turns out he was like an orientation leader. So there was like 12 like orientation leaders at Hofstra that everyone knows because they're like the face of the school. And I saw him again, and I texted my other friend who was an orientation. I said, oh, that's the guy I have a crush on. He's heading your way right now towards the student center. Who is he? And my friend was like, oh, that's Steve, blah, blah, blah. And he actually lives a few floors above you in your dorm building. And I don't know how, like, I friended him on Facebook. Like, I got his last name, and I just, like, added him just shamelessly. And and so he knew who I was. And then a few weeks later, my parents stopped by to visit. And I'm groggy, probably like hungover. I have like socks on with flip-flops. I'm like unkempt. I pressed the down button in the elevator. Lo and behold, of all people, who's in the elevator? We've never like introduced each other. Like we just know each other's Facebook, and I get in the elevator. And yeah, that's how it happened. And he was like, hey, Greg, how's it going? And I was just like, yeah. And like he was like, where are you going? And I'm like, my parents are here. It was so embarrassing.
I was dying. In the book, he says, hi, how are you? And instead of responding like, good, how are you? You say, yes. like, oh my God.
It was like, I'm like sweating thinking about it now because it was mortifying.
It's like a Mean Girls like gruel moment.
Yes,
like,
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I never actually even changed his name in a book. That's his real name.
I'm sure he would take it as a compliment. It was very, you were very complimentary of him. Then you moved on from college, or no, you were still in college, and this was my favorite part of the book. I mean, I keep saying that this is my favorite part. This is my favorite part. But the way you talk about this era of New York, like the early 2010s,
Yeah.
and it feels like you sort of found your tribe and your sense of self in New York, and the way you depict it in the book, it feels like in some ways, like definitely now at 2020, it's this bygone era, right? Like it was this sort of moment in time in mostly the Lower East Side. And the way New York just so rapidly changes, that scene, it'll reemerge after all of this, but it'll look different, and it'll belong to some other kids who are 19, 20, 21. And so I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little bit more about the scene you found yourself in, because it's so cool. I was so jealous reading this. It's like, damn, like I wish I was at Magic Monday, you know? Like,
I mean, this book is nothing if not a testament to chosen family as well. That's why there's a photo spread right in the middle of the book, just so people can get an idea of like how much love this community exuded and continues to exude as everyone sort of, you know, hopscotches around the world. But
sorry to interrupt, but can we just like point out one of the most, probably the second most famous aside from you, person who was in this scene?
Who?
At the time.
Is it a lady?
It might have been a lady.
You're talking about our patron saint, Our Lady Gaga. Yeah,
I sure am. But we'll get to her. We'll get to her in a second. But so set the scene for us. Sorry to interrupt.
Speaking of Gaga, I have a Chromatica blanket, and it's very comfortable. I fully endorse it.
I was listening to it in the shower before while I was getting ready for this to kind of like set my mentality right.
Okay, what? See, I'm gonna go off a tangent now. What's your least listened to track? Because I'm very curious.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know what I usually sort of just listen to it all the way through, but my favorite ones are 911 and Free Woman.
Love it.
And maybe, and Stupid Love, probably.
Staples. Yes, I agree with that. Thank you.
I like them all.
Perfect. Yeah, because it's a very like cohesive. It's like it's like a memoir, actually, kind of. It's like it's split into 3 parts. Okay, see, now we're like analyzing this whole time. Anyway, you know what I'm saying though, right? There's Chromatica 1, Chromatica 2, Chromatica 3. There's a whole 3-act structure. Anyway, I digress. So this scene itself, I mean, like you said, New York is nothing if not resilient. It's gonna come back in some capacity or another. But for me, I really wanted to put together, like, do you know the book, the CBGB Umfug book from like the CBGB era, like the dive bar that, you know, the Stooges played, television played, Joan Jett, Blondie. I wanted to put together a book that obviously it's a comedic memoir, but I wanted to have some sort of like, it could be like some sort of memorabilia about early 2010s New York City nightlife. Pardon me. And that community to me, like, yes, it buoyed everything about me. All of my, you know, every facet of my identity, like, came to the surface just because of the friends that I found in that community. And it really started with like the internet and like MySpace. I came across this performance artist named Lady Starlight, and you probably have heard of her because of her partner in crime, Gaga. But I found Lady Starlight and I was like, this woman is wild. She's like lighting hairspray on fire. She's weird. She has like, you know, mullet. And then I came across very young Gaga and I found her on MySpace and I'm like, okay, this chick is also very cool. Like, this song Just Dance sounds like it's gonna be a like #1. and this is like the year before 2 years before I started like really going out. Like, I was still in high school and I became a freshman at Hofstra, and then I started going downtown and I met these folks. I met Lady Starlight and Brie Love, these folks with these really cool monikers and cool names. And, you know, I was 18-year-old freshly from New Jersey. I didn't feel cool enough to know these people. And this is the point where, you know, Gaga like just shot to fame after, you know, Just Dance came out and the Fame was released. But yeah, I just found this like group of really cool people, and they were like, "Oh, your last name's Mania. Where'd you get that?" And I'm like, "Well, that's actually my last name. It's Mania." And they were like, "You're Greg Mania, though." And I was like, "Okay, that's it." Like I was coronated basically, and I just spent many years with these same people in different venues all over the Lower East Side. And yes, it's that era is definitely gone. It was like the tail end of, you know, one of the golden eras of nightlife, like that you would see, like, you know, Debbie Harry would be popping in, and you know, Molly Ringwald would pop up at an event like next to you because your friend's DJing a party. I remember the first night I went to my first event at Bowery Ballroom, the night that I became Greg Mania, and I met a DJ buddy named DJ VH1, and he was like, "Oh, I know you from Facebook, whatever. You're friends with one of my other friends. Do you want to come to a party tomorrow that I'm DJing?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" And it was Molly Ringwald's book release at Swarovski in Soho. And I turn around at the bar and Debbie Harry's drinking a bottle, like a glass of wine, probably a bottle. And it was just one of those surreal New York moments. But after that, it was like, you know, it's not going to be like this again, because St. Jerome, the bar that I wrote about so much, it's not there anymore. And even yesterday, I was walking through the Lower East Side after a doctor's appointment, and Essex Street is just, there's a giant Essex Street market. Like that was never, there's a Regal Cinemas there. I'm just like, there's so many things I don't recognize about anymore. It's just, I'm happy I could capture it in this book because it was everything to me.
So cool. Yeah, no. And before we got started, we were talking about optimism and pessimism, and you're a renowned pessimist.
Yeah,
and
you.
and love and thrive on negativity, which I need to channel more. And I'm more of an optimist. And
half an hour to convert you.
I know, we're getting there. We're getting there. And you know, I think about this scene that you're describing, and I think that's one of the things that felt so universal, even though it was such a specific scene and time. It's so New York, right? Like it's such a universal New York experience. Like even when you're you can be like struggling to figure out like how you're gonna even come up with like money for your next Metro card, but then you can turn around and somehow like bump into, you know, and turn around and see Debbie Harry drinking out of a wine bottle.
That's a,
you know, there's just you're just sort of constantly colliding with just so much sensory. It's sensory overload, and everyone is sort of thrown into this you know, thrown into things together in a way that I can't wait for it to come back, and it will. And I guess like I'm just thinking too, I'd love to hear, this is a totally half-formed question right now, but you talked to and sort of poignantly about how you were bullied heavily as a kid, and you endured that. And to me, it speaks to a degree of resilience and strength to then to not let that define you, you know, to know that you are meant for more, and that, you know, I'm guessing, or I'm trying to say, and I'm curious to know, like, how did you go from being the bullied kid to being in the in crowd?
Right.
What shifted mentally for you? Or was it just you found yourself in it and you embraced it?
I think it came in stages because, yeah, I mean, I was bullied a lot in, like, you know, in elementary school and then intermediate school. And then it took on different forms in middle school. I mean, it was always physical and emotional, but in high school, you know, I joined theater, as one does. And I found like a tribe there. And then it really was the internet, like going on MySpace and finding characters in New York City, like Lady Starlight, where I'm like, oh, there's a world out there beyond the world that I know, and like this insular bubble that I'm living in, and I could maybe, you know, travel there. And that's why I applied to schools in New York. Every school I applied to was, you know, I did New School and Hofstra, like everything was in that, you know, vicinity of New York City. And once I got accepted, then it sort of like made me want to explore a bit more. And it was incremental because like I still didn't feel like the cool kid. Like the first year or two, I was like, why are these people friends with me? Like, don't they know that I wasn't really the cool kid, the popular kid? Like, you know, I still felt like, you know, the 16-year-old, 15-year-old like kid in high school that had theater, and that was pretty much it. Like, and then seeing how, you know, my friends responded to me and encouraged me and always sort of like fan the flames of my self-confidence, like that sort of did it for me. So they sort of like pulled me out of that. It's like I was in that closet and they got the vaudeville hook and they hooked into me and they like slowly got me out.
Yeah.
And then I started to believe it myself. Like it took a while for me to be like, oh, you're actually cool. Like I would hang out with you. Like, and it really was, you know, they just like held up a mirror and they were like, this is what we see. Like, why can't you see that too? And it took a few good years, and I still have to like be like, hey, you know, I have my ups and downs, I have my self-doubt and all that, but you know, that really like sort of changed my life. I mean, that it pivoted me in a trajectory that made me end up here today.
I mean, I just love that because it sounds like there are these two elements at play. First of all, it's a matter of you having the power of imagination to be able to imagine a better life for yourself, one in which you are one that's more inclusive and more embracing, and that that celebrates you, you know. And seeing it, it's hard when you're a high schooler, or when you've just moved to a new city, or even if you've been in your same routine for a long time and you're really entrenched in it. It's hard to imagine your way out of it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and that's something that you did, which is really, really cool. And then coupled with that, you found the right people. You found the chosen family to then who saw what you imagined
Right.
and helped you create that too,
Yeah.
which is so cool. And it's just like, I don't know, I take it as like a good reminder, especially in 2020, where like we are all not living the lives that we imagined this year, that we can still do that. You know, we can still look forward
Yeah.
and think of a future in which like things aren't going to be like this. At least who knows what they'll be like, but they won't be this. Like,
Yeah.
thank God.
I mean,
Anyway, we've gone off on a total tangent. I've completely abandoned my.
You're so optimistic. I'm like, what future? There's gonna be like this Earth is gonna implode by then. Like, I'm like, that's very no. But I see. But I need to tap into that a bit more. Like, okay.
In your book, I mean, I'm literally just describing like the journey that you laid out in your book. Like, you may be a pessimist, but you actually did a very optimistic thing. So
Well,
I think you're an optimist at heart, but
here, you take it back.
well, okay, speaking of optimism and especially pessimism,
Mm-hmm.
you so you talk a lot about romance in the book and relationships, and you you talked about this one really formative relationship with this guy named Roy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if you, because I feel like, you know, whether it's a romantic relationship or a work relationship, we've all had those very challenging relationships in our lives that break our hearts and that break us really sometimes. And I'm wondering, having been at a remove now, an emotional remove, and just having time had passed,
Yeah.
and you reflecting back on that relationship, what did you learn from that? Like what came to the surface as you were revisiting that for the book?
Yeah, that chapter was like the one I was like, I didn't even think I was gonna include. I was like, I'm not ready to write about it. I'm just gonna put it in the next book. But towards like the end, like even when my former agent was going out with the book, it still wasn't even in the book yet. Like this was last minute, like, okay, I revised the proposal and I'm gonna go back out with this book project. And that's when I included the chapter Roy, because I thought I wasn't ready, but I don't think I would have ever been ready in that way. Like, yes, enough time has passed, but I sort of learned what I needed to learn from that relationship. And yes, even though it's painful to write, I couldn't not include it because that relationship made me shift my trajectory and made me want to pursue becoming a writer and a comedian and eventually put a book out. Like having that relationship taught me like, oh, if I need to learn how to treat myself better because I didn't have any self-respect. This is an abusive relationship and I had to sort of unlearn a lot of things that I was sort of manipulated into believing. And I wrote that chapter like this is the last chapter that I wrote, and I included it because it was important to the overarching narrative of the book. Like that was literally like in the middle of it, because the second half of the book is about career and finding a place for myself again in an industry that again I felt like a newcomer, didn't feel cool enough to be in publishing, and that relationship shifted that and put me in that direction. So, and beyond that, that relationship taught me how to give and receive love unconditionally, without caveats, without any sort of toxicity or gaslighting or manipulation. And yes, I talk about how this Roy was someone that was, and again, I don't prescribe, this is not a prescriptive book, this is not how to cure depression or anxiety. And I had to be careful because this is also his story and I have to respect his side of things. So I didn't say like this guy was a narcissist, definitely undiagnosed borderline personality disorder. I said, from what I told my therapist, she thinks that he may or may not be an undiagnosed borderline because of the behaviors that he exhibited. And I have to be cognizant of the fact that's not just my story, but I have to write what I remember to the best of my memory's ability. And I think I did that. And I don't know if he's gonna read it. If he does, I did tell him, he does reach out once in a while, and I'm like, hey, by the way, I wrote about this, and I'm not asking for your permission, but I just want you to know as a courtesy that I did write about this, and I did not co-opt your POV. This is my perspective, my recollections. And yeah, I'm glad I put that in because it really was, again, another turning point for me as not just a young professional, but also as a human being, as someone who has a lot of love to give and was in a relationship that was not healthy. It taught me that I didn't want to be like that. I wanted to give and receive love in a way that is reciprocated and just the most purest version of it can be, unconditional.
I love that. Well, I'm really glad you included that section too, because I thought it was one of the most powerful in the book. And so bring us up to speed now. Like you have found love.
Yeah.
And you're in like a like classic It's a Wonderful Life relationship. Tell us about that contrast.
Yeah, so
where you are now.
Yeah, of course. I mean, like they're right there. Pete's right, literally, they're here with us tonight. Yeah, so Pete and
Sorry, I didn't realize that.
that's them. Yeah, Pete and I met 3-4 years ago, almost 4 years ago now. And Pete is very much a part of my story as well, and I do write about them in the book, obviously. But it again, like that sort of, again, after one relationship fail after another, like I was over everything. I had the apps. I was deleting them. And then right as I'm about to delete fucking Scruff, I'm like on the train and I come across Pete's face and I'm like, who's this cutie? And we like, what's it called? Winked or woofed at each other. Whatever. You know what I mean, right? And then Pete messaged me back and I gave them my number and I was like, I'm gonna delete this app. If you want to text me, text me. Did not think I would hear from them ever again. Because I literally deleted it. I'm like, I'm over this. And Pete texted me and the rest was history. And but yeah, we've been together ever since. And yeah, they're perfect. And
That's amazing. Well,
yeah.
tell us a little, I'm always interested to hear like how the process, right? Like,
Yeah.
how did you're a freelance writer, you're extremely busy, you're juggling a million different projects and deadlines all the time. How did you find time to write? Like, what was your writing routine?
Yeah, I mean this book grew up with me. Like I had the idea for it right after college. I'm like, I want to write but it wasn't a memoir. It was like vignettes, funny stories and anecdotes about New York nightlife, dumb shit that I did when I was drunk, and like, Breed Love and Starlight, all that stuff. But then as I grew up, the book grew up with me, and I moved to my first apartment in Harlem, and I started interning, and then I started including like stories about mental health, and I was like, oh shit, I think this is a memoir.
Yeah.
And I followed in the footsteps. I was reading books that I want. Megan Amram is, you worked with Megan, and Megan's a comedy hero to me. And I just really studied like Megan Amram and Isaac Oliver and David Sedaris and like all of these writers that I was sort of just reading on a daily basis. Sam Irby, Shrill, Lindy West Shrill came out around that time too. So I was learning and consuming, and just it turned into a memoir. And as I wrote the memoir, I was working odd jobs. I was working in retail. I was working as an assistant at the news school, and just writing in between. Like, I was writing at work. I was like, I'm not the worst employee ever. I was like, please hold. And
I mean, we've all been there.
Yeah, I'll be at the retail job and I'll be like in the back, and there's like a customer like waiting to get checked out. And I'm like, I need to finish writing this Panera joke. Give me a second. So yeah, and then as the book came along, so did like freelancing and getting a column at Out Magazine, and because I knew, I did research. I was like, okay, when you're putting a nonfiction book together, editors look at your platform, so I have to work on a platform because that's how you sell. That's just how it is. And I know that publishing is changing now, and I get that now we're honoring voices more as opposed to marketability, which is also important. But at the time, I was like, okay, I need to get a few things under my belt before I pitch a book, because that was the end game for me, was to put a book out.
Yeah.
And I really was like, okay, I got Out Magazine. What can I do next? Oh, Bullet. I can do Bullet now. And then I worked my way up, and then I did Paper, and that's sort of just how it happened, because I knew, like, your book's your baby, and like I have to nurture it. And once it's time to like get my book out there, I need to be the best that I can be for it, so the book can then, I can pass the baton, and the book will, take care of me in the end. Classic.
Well, that's an amazing roadmap, that really being on the other side of things, it's like that's the dream, really. That's the thing that a lot of publishers are looking for, is to partner with an author who is ready to pull out all the stops,
right?
Basically, who is ready to, because when I acquire a book, I do it because I'm super passionate about it, and I think it's the best thing I've ever written. And that's always the starting point of any book that I acquire, is that I just freaking love this. So
right.
I'm gonna go all out for it. And when you have an author who's also willing to go all out for their book, to call in the favors that are uncomfortable to call into, to make asks that like you wouldn't normally do, but you just this is your shot, and you're shooting your shot. Like, the authors that are willing to shoot their shots are the ones that that's what separates books from coverage or not, really.
Right.
Often.
Right. Yeah, and like
Um,
years of like building connections, and every assignment that I got, and this is again, I talk about this or I write about this, and it really wasn't healthy because I never said no to anything. I was like, this piece might get me a cover story. This piece might get me a byline in this magazine, and like everything that I'm doing is because I know I want to sell this book, and I know that editors and agents are going to look at that. They're going to Google me. I need to make sure I have something to show up for that. And yeah, I stretched myself thin. It really wasn't healthy all the time because I was just mentally just done. And but in the end, like especially now as I get to work on book two, now I feel like maybe I've worked hard for this, and
yeah,
I've gotten my ticket to notoriety, and now I can actually say no to things. I've learned
right.
to like respect my worth, which is something I had to learn with the first book. I didn't
Yeah.
always respect my worth, but now I've learned that, and I think I can hopefully apply that.
I think it's a good lesson, saying yes to everything. It's something that like is not sustainable, of course, but
Right.
it's not the worst thing,
Yeah.
for a time,
Yeah.
especially when you're just starting out, that was sort of that was definitely my mindset when I went into the lead up to publishing my own book. I will say yes to absolutely everything.
Yeah.
Um, and um, yeah, I think that it can be helpful. It's good to hear. And it's almost like even the no's are tickets to the game
Yeah.
still.
Yeah.
It means you're playing ball,
Right.
You
Exactly.
get the rejections, and yeah, they suck, but it's part of developing a thick skin.
Oh yeah. Exactly.
Everyone hears no all the time in the publishing world, in the book world. And it doesn't mean that the no is because you don't have talent or you don't
Right.
deserve to have this piece published or whatever the case is. It often is for reasons that are completely outside of really anyone's control.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah. They're the catalog is full already, or they think it's a better fit for another agent at the agency. There's always value in it because they're like, okay, a lot of the rejections I got actually were wonderful because they were like, we love this material, but we need this or X or whatever the reason is. There's always some sort of tidbit you can like pull from each
yeah,
one, and
totally.
there's always value in that.
Totally. Um, well, I want to be mindful of the time too, and I'm dying to know like what you keep talking about this second book. I'm I know you're never really supposed to ask a writer what they're working on, but like you're born to be public, bitch.
I
So
know.
so you gotta tell us what's the
Yeah,
second book?
I know. I have to listen. I've put this fate on myself by calling my first book that, and I just have to go with it. Yeah, I mean, I've been pretty public about it. The next book is it's going to be essays, and it sort of picks up where Born to Be Public left off in terms of mental health. I mean, I go pretty in depth about depression, anxiety, and PTSD, but the next book is going to be essays where I sort of like touch on chronic pain, but the next book is going to be about finding I've been chasing a diagnosis for 2 years now, and what that does to your body and your mind, all on
Yeah.
more funny. So it's gonna be a collection of essays about just the headaches of life, and it's gonna be negative and great.
That sounds amazing. I feel like I want that book to exist right now. And it feels like the kind of book that like will impact a lot of readers.
Yeah,
And
because
your humor and your voice lowers the barrier of entry for an otherwise
thank you.
heavy subject.
Yeah,
It becomes the foothold or the doorway in, I
yeah,
guess, is the better.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because like I mean, I can tell you this, like the whole not the whole book, but the reason I want to write this book is I want to tackle the whole youth is health ideology, because I think that's not I think that's a harmful thing to say to someone. Like, you're not giving us, just because we're of a certain age, we're young, we can't be chronically ill. Like, we don't have permission to be like, let us be sick. Like that's sort of what the book is. Like, I hear this all the time. If I say something and someone's like, oh, you're too young to have that, it like makes me want to like retract and be like, oh, then what what permission do you give me then? Like, how can
Yeah, what the hell do you know?
Yeah, so that the book is going to be, it's life headaches. It's going to be about, mental health, medical diagnoses, trying to be believed and get the right medical care, all while sort of combating this societal pressure that we have because we're young and we should be healthy and we should be able-bodied, but that's not the case for everyone. It's another coming out for me. I really haven't talked much about chronic pain and the impact of trauma in my life because a lot of people don't talk about that. Like just now, I think the whole conversation of chronic pain, not to bring it back to our girl, Lady Gaga, but she sort of like put that out there in the past few years. Like, remember that Oprah conversation where she's talking about fibromyalgia? Fibromyalgia has been seen like a theory. I'm like, no, that's a real thing. Like fibromyalgia is like it's a nebulous thing to diagnose because it's diagnosis by exclusion. And I haven't been diagnosed with that yet, but I'm sure it's coming down the pipe. But again, like I'm talking about getting diagnosed with SIBO, which is a syndrome that infects your bowels. And that was really depressing for me. And that gave me a lot of anxiety. And it's just, that's what the whole book is going to be about, because I feel like the conversation of chronic pain and trauma, like no one's story is the same. And I feel like the more voices we can put out there, the better. And I hope maybe someone will find solace in my story. And
100%. Yeah, it feels like, I don't know, just thinking about the current state of the world too. It's a book that like perfectly meets the moment we're at.
Yeah,
like
I'm like,
there's just people are struggling with so much, especially in terms of mental health.
yeah,
right now.
and it's very symbiotic too. Like and my partner's public about this. My partner was diagnosed with MS this year, as if this year wasn't any like more fucking nuts. Like, and MS it takes a toll. There's physical and mental components that affect the body and mind. And my partner's 30. They're a baby. So, and the fact that they have to live with this chronic condition, I feel like is hard because you have to give yourself permission to have your off days, or your mobility might be off, or you're not feeling it that day. And it really is hard to feel like that on top of like this overarching narrative that we're young, we're supposed to be strong by nature and resilient, when some days I don't really feel resilient. I feel defeated, and I sort of have to just let myself feel that way. And
well, when I feel defeated, my go-to is Taylor Swift usually. And we've talked a lot about Lady Gaga, but we haven't given Taylor Swift a lot of due. And I'm not sure where you stand on the Taylor Swift fandom scale, and I'm almost afraid to ask. But so rather than ask, because we can have that conversation offline. When I want to know, like, what is, because like music plays such a huge part of this, and I'm looking at the time, and this feels like a good note to end on, but like what's your fight song? Like
my
when
fight song.
Yeah, like when you really need to just like get back, like to, you're feeling down, you want to pick yourself up. What's your fight song?
Where's My Mind by the Pixies.
I love it. Perfect.
I was gonna throw that right back at you, John. How dare you? Just kidding. I love you.
So good. That's so good. Awesome. Well,
no, I think I'll be sincere with you. That's a good question.
It's a hard one off the cuff. I'm trying to think now. I don't know if I would have one, but
like something I've been listening to, like it goes like, honestly, recently we've been like obsessed with Sister Act. Like again,
oh fuck yeah!
I'm like going on my iTunes now to see like what we've been jamming to. Chromatica's like all up in this bitch. Oh, you know who I've been obsessed with? It's a duo called Saint Beauty.
Oh.
And they opened for Janelle Monáe a few years ago, and I'm just obsessed with Saint Beauty.
Cool.
Yeah. Chloe and Halle have a great new album. If you don't know Chloe and Halle, check out Chloe and Halle.
Awesome. I will. Well, it has been such a treat and an honor talking to you. I can't wait to be able to see you in person
I
and
know.
celebrate all of your success too.
Right back at you, John. I appreciate it. Thank you. You know, I'm obsessed. Everyone who's watching this, you need to get out east. I've talked about this in Oprah and Electric Lit. Get this book. This is how this relationship started. I literally just like, what are the kids saying? I slipped into your DMs. And yeah, and the rest was history. And it really means a lot to me because I'm obsessed with you. Point blank.
Well, likewise.
All right. And thank you, Greg, for having us.
Of course. I hope next time it can be at the store.
Oh, I hope so. Yeah, we're gonna make
Absolutely.
it.
Someday we will open again.
We'll be there. We'll be there with White Claws in hand.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys both so much. Everyone have a good night. I'll share this with you guys after I post it on YouTube, and you can share it with the world.
Beautiful.
Great.
Thank you so much, everyone. Stay safe, all right?
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Bye.